Hello and welcome to this episode of the Practical Creative Podcast, where I talk to my guests about the how and why of creativity. As an actor and an artist, I've developed my own creative process, but I'm fascinated by how other creatives approach their work, comparing notes on how they manage their energy and mindset, how they think about their work, why they've chosen a particular material or process, and so much more. In this season of The Practical Creative, I'm exploring the idea of play, speaking with my guests about the role of play in their work and their lives, and what it is that we can all gain by incorporating a little more fun into our own practices. I'm Jeremiah Krage, and in this episode I'm speaking with Sandy Brown. Sandy is an award-winning artist whose work appears in collections around the globe. Her work is the result of a fierce commitment to a spontaneous and intuitive process. In fact, you'll hear the phrases letting go, being in the here and now, and empty mind several times in this interview. Sandy works across a range of media, including ceramics, painting, installation, and sculpture, and her work is always bold, energetic, and hugely life-affirming. This conversation was recorded at her home in the seaside village of Appledore, Devon, in the UK, where Sandy also has her studio and exhibition space. And some of the topics we cover include key moments that really helped her to define her intuitive approach, how Sandy cultivates a state of not knowing when she's creating her work, the value of trusting intuition and allowing your body to lead the creative process, dealing with uncertainty, fear, and even not liking your own work, the importance of letting go and saying yes, and what it is that drives her to consistently take on new and bigger challenges. This was a delightful conversation with one of the bravest artists I know. Sandy's commitment to and trust in the act of letting go, of not knowing, is as challenging as it is inspiring. So please enjoy. The first question I always ask my guests is, who are you and what do you do?
I see, like as if I was on Strictly or something.
Oh,
I'm Sandy Brown, and I'm. In fact, somebody asked me on an email the other day, was I a potter or a painter or a sculptor or a designer? And I said yes. I'm all of those. Artist, yes. So that I'm a sculptor, potter, painter, ceramic artist, designer, architect. Yes. Yeah, I'll say yes to all of those.
Wonderful. Brilliant. So I would imagine most people probably know you more for working with clay.
Yes.
But you are constantly exploring such a wide range of materials. Did you start with clay?
Yes.
And what took you off of clay or to move beyond just clay as a medium?
Well, I don't think I've never gone off clay. I've never been off clay. Clay's a constant. But I did notice after about sort of 20 years or so that, I noticed, well, it's perfectly bleeding obvious actually, that a lot of my work is very painterly, that I was effectively doing a sort of a potter's language in paint, using a potter's tools like slip trailers and the tools that potters use but painters don't use normally. And building up a language of working with the ceramics. And then I thought, well, what would it be like if I actually did it on paper? Would the language that I'm working with survive? What would happen? What would happen? And so I was quite curious because I do enjoy that part of it. And so it sort of really developed from there. And then another thing was I was invited, this was in 1988, I was invited to Australia to be artist in residence in an art school in Australia for 6 months. And it was a brilliant residency, because it was well funded, which they're not normally, and it was well supported sort of psychically and spiritually. Even although I was in an art school, I was told by the head of the school on the first day that I was not there to teach. They had tutors there to teach. My role was basically to be an artist. And they wanted me to do, and they didn't want me to do what I'd always done. They didn't say, just because you've done all that stuff before, just means you come along and repeat what you've always done. It's your job is to just do whatever, really. And if you want to do something you've never done before, that's great too. And so after, it was a fabulous introduction, really. plus the fact that I had a house and a car thrown in as well, you know. And they said, after I'd been there for a while, they said, is there anything you'd like to do that you haven't done? So I said, okay, well, maybe I'll do some paintings then. So the next day, I mean, they were very generous with materials, and the next day they carried in paintings, canvases they'd stretched for me. This size, I didn't mention size, I just said I'd like to do some painting. So they brought in some paintings that were about this size, you know, 6 foot, almost 6 foot by 5'6", you know, huge. And they said, is this all right? Is this big enough for you? God, amazing. Australia, they brought in several, you know, Australia, amazing, really, because it's such a big empty place that, so that actually, I just sort of steamed into painting. And I remember this particular art school had a printmaking faculty, it had a painting faculty, it had ceramics, and it had printmaking and sculpture, that was the other one. And I remember the painting tutor, it wasn't the painting tutor because I got on well with him, but one of the tutors was quite shocked to see that she's just steamed into painting the way she steams into her ceramics, you know. Well, like, what's the point of that? Almost, he was about to sort of say. He didn't get it. The others got it. So that's what I did. I mean, I approached those big paintings in the same way that I approach painting on all the ceramics that I do, which is, you know, just start somewhere. All I needed to do was choose the first colour, and then I'd go off. Something would happen after that. You know, not planning, So they were quite strong. There were some good paintings. Yeah.
What is it that you think this one tutor didn't get that the others did?
Oh, well, I hadn't prepared, you know, I didn't know what I was doing, which is true. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I think he thought I should have done some preparatory sketches probably, or prepared, or have some sort of concept, you know, none of which I had, and all of which I was definitely resisting having. So I didn't actually talk to him about it, but my sense is that could have been his objection to it. But, you know, everybody else absolutely got it, and it was great to see the energy that I had in the studio sort of spilling out to you know. I noticed that the students, because I was there for 6 months, I could see evolution of some of the students, and I could walk around their studios every so often and see what was happening, and occasionally I would invite 1 or 2 of them to come in to see what I was doing, and I could see them becoming bolder and more confident, and, you know, trying a few things, and it was great to see that.
So what is it that you do that spills out of the studio? What is it about how you work and how you approach your work that you think that has that effect?
I think it is that intuitive, spontaneous, allowing the body to lead spirit, that actually, I've noticed when other people find it, they love it. They absolutely love it. It's the best place to be, actually. It's not only how to do art, it's how to live, really. It's just not to have any attachment to the outcome, but to focus on the doing of it, on the process. It's actually about being in the here and now. It's actually a form of meditating, but there's an outcome which is slightly different from when you meditate. It's an outcome which is, you know, a piece of art, and it's a very enjoyable place to be while you're doing it. And yeah, and I think once people get it, and I've noticed, you know, this happens not only in the students in this art school, but, you know, when I'm running courses as well. When people get it, they become sort of emboldened and confident, and because actually it's their essential essence that's coming out. It's the essence of who they are. It's the essence of who I am that is coming out in the work. And I always feel enormously lifted when people like my work, because I think if you like my work, then you like me, because that, you know, that is it. And so it's a wonderful thing to hear.
So how often do you surprise yourself with what comes out at the end of that process?
No, I always do. I always do, because I don't know what I'm going to do.
And do you think you're learning more about who you are by looking at what you've made?
Yes, I do actually. Yes. Yes, I do. Yeah. Very much so. I mean, certainly because certainly with the clay work that I've done, because I make this approach in clay. I've noticed that some stuff has come out, which is actually, it's come from my unconscious. It's like a waking dream, and it teaches me about myself. It teaches me maybe feelings that I didn't know I had, or and so it's very, very powerful from that. I think the sense of touch, the tactile sense, is a doorway to the unconscious. It's a doorway in to the deepest, almost the deepest part of ourselves. And so, I have learned about myself a lot from what I've been making in clay, more than what I've been doing in painting. Actually, I think with painting, it's a language. It's a bit like sort of a musical. It's a bit like playing instrumental music. I'm working in a language of color and form, and it's abstract, and so it's less, because it's not representational. I can see a sort of progression, maybe in confidence, and a progression in probably they're getting richer. I think they're getting richer in over the years, the more I've been doing it. But actually, in terms of my own sort of emotional composition, I've learnt more about myself from what has come out in the clay through the sense of touch.
That's interesting. Yeah. So following on from that, you seem to be constantly exploring, creating new challenges for yourself.
Yes.
Constantly, which I found absolutely extraordinary. I know. Yeah. So you've started in clay, but you've incorporated paint as well. You've done installations. I know you did a collaboration with a dancer. You've built this enormous life-size, entirely ceramic temple that people can actually go inside, and it's painted, or it's decorated inside and outside, glazed inside and outside. Now you have a new project trying to make enormous glazed paintings on single sheets, massive tiles of clay. What drives you to keep pushing or finding new expressions?
Well, I just like doing things that I've never done before, actually. And often things are triggered by commissions or things that I'm asked to do. I mean, the fact that I make large sculptures in the first place was triggered by a collector who's unfortunately since died, a man called Lionel Phillips, who was a great collector, patron of the arts. And he came to the studio one day, and I had a pot, a sort of simple vase form, or it was about sort of a foot tall, if it was that. And he liked it, and he said, "Oh, can you make that one 2 meters tall for me? It would look great outside." So actually, that's what started the whole body of work that I'm probably still playing with, of making, because then I had to have I did make some large pieces for him, and then I had to have a new kiln, which meant that eventually I had to have a large studio, and then because I have a large studio, I can make more large things, and then more things happened. And quite often things are triggered by commissions, actually, even sort of fairly innocuous things like candelabra. I'd never made any candelabra till somebody commissioned it, and this is probably not, somebody wanted me to make a giant teapot that was sort of 3 meters tall, so I did that as well. And I love doing things that I've never done before, because I can do it in my way, and I never would have thought of doing a large teapot. I don't think I would have, I don't think it would have struck me, but it was a lovely thing to do. And the temple was slightly different, but it was in as much as I was invited to participate in this, big exhibition of 20th century sculpture, and then, which was going to be at Chatsworth House, and it gradually became clear I think I knew from the start that I was going to be the only ceramics person in the show, and the other exhibiting artists were the biggest names you could mention in British sculpture, like Henry Moore and Barbara Hepworth and
Wow, yeah.
Anthony Gormley and Damien Hirst. And so they walked me around Chatsworth. And they said, well, you could do something to go there, or you could do something to go over here, and we want you to be really ambitious. We want you to be really ambitious and do something you've never done before, which is music to my ears, isn't it? It's just fabulous. And so they walked me around. I spent all day walking around the grounds in Chatsworth, and at the end of the day we were having a coffee, and they said, okay, so, right, what would you like to do then? Have you had any thoughts? And I just heard myself say, because I hadn't planned it, but I just heard myself say, oh, well, I think I'll make a big temple, a ceramic temple. I think I said a ceramic temple. And they said, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. And I thought, oh, Christ, what do I do now? How do I do it? But, you know, that's how that triggered. And so, and also the large tiles that I'm doing now, the large tile paintings I'm doing now, is somebody has asked me to make some really big tile paintings in one piece to go outside. So I just thought, I'll see how big I can go. And what I've done with everything that I've scaled up is, even with the piece that I did, that first large piece that I did for Lionel, was a fairly simple form, so I could suddenly go from 1 foot to 2 meters in one go. But with some of the other forms, I've got big gradually, you know, done them, you know, gone up in size in stages, sort of teaching myself the technology of how to do it and what works best as I go. And so I've done that with the tiles as well, you know, just sort of making them slightly bigger than I'd done before, and then gradually making more and more a bit bigger. And so I think I've worked out how to do it. So the only limit now really is, what can I physically lift in the raw state, and what can I physically put in the kiln? That's the limit.
Brilliant.
So yeah, I'm quite pleased with the way they're going, actually. Yeah. And I quite like a technical challenge.
Yeah, no, I can tell. I was looking at you. Yeah. How wonderful. You said you heard yourself saying, I'll build a temple. How often does that happen? Where, and what do you think is happening, where you're almost ahead of yourself? There's some part of you that's making decisions or seeing something that some other part of yourself, perhaps a more cautious part of yourself, hasn't seen or would be reluctant to commit to. Somehow you kind of leapfrog that, because I feel like you do that in your process as well. When you're creating, you somehow manage to sidestep or maybe it's not sidestepping. To me, I feel like I would have to sidestep a part of myself that would want to not make a mistake or not commit to something I wouldn't be able to fulfill. However, you seem to always be able to, in your work and in the new challenges you create for yourself, almost dig the hole and then jump in and figure out how deep it is.
It's quite remarkable. It actually does amaze me as well, because I'm not like that in other areas of my life, but in the studio and in my artwork, I think I benefited very, very early on from I know that working with Takashi Yasuda was really significant in the early days, when I might have become more cautious, so I might have he was always brilliant at noticing when I'd sort of almost accidentally let go, and identify, you know, noticing that, oh look, this isn't free, and much more energy and playfulness than this. You know, why don't you continue down this road? And I'm pretty certain I wouldn't have had the confidence to do that had I not had his support in the very, very early stages, when I was like learning to walk, you know. And so that was important. And the other thing that was important was, I remember it was a significant evening in the studio, quite early on, and I had a pile of plates to paint for an exhibition deadline coming up. And I love painting the plates, and I had one particular plate from an earlier batch that I'd really liked. I thought, this has worked really well. I'm going to do another one like this.
I know the feeling, yeah.
And yeah, do you? Yes, exactly. So I thought, okay, I know it's got a big, I can't even remember which one it was now, but just say for the sake of it, big blue swish and a couple of splodges and a bit of glaze trailing over the top. And I tried to, and the more I tried, the more it just looked, stiff and unnatural. The composition didn't work. And I realised, it took me, a couple of hours I was messing about with these blooming plates. And then I realised that actually the reason why the first one worked wasn't because of the fact that there was blue with a bit green and a couple of splodges. It was because of the state I was in when I did it. And the plate was evidence of the state I was in when I did it. And that was probably the most significant realization I've ever made in my creative life, actually. That actually the way to do the next one then was to get myself into that state. And as long as I get myself into that state, then everything's fine.
And what is that state? How would you describe that?
That state is in a state of actually, A, not knowing what's going to happen. It's being in the here and now. Because that's right. What I did after that, so the first plate I painted, after I'd made that realization, okay, that it's actually, I can't copy that one, not without a whole load of, measuring and technical stuff. Okay, I'll just watch my hands then. So this is what I did. What do my hands want to do? So I've always got my glazes. I've got about 10 big pots of glaze around the table. I've got all the brushes and the slip trailers. It's all there, ready. What do my hands want to do? So, okay, this hand, what's it going to do? Oh, yeah, this hand is going to go over there, and it's going to pick up that wide brush. Oh, and then it's going to go into the bucket of green. Wow. And then what's it going to do? Or it's going to go, big arc. Okay, what's going to happen next? I see. So we put that brush down, pick up another one. Okay, pick up a blobby, and it's going to go into the orange, and it's going blob, 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 blob. Oh, now, what's going to happen next then? I see. Okay, we might go towards the manganese. And the manganese is over there, so we pick up that and they go doom, doom, doom. And that's how I do it, really. So it was watching my hands that helped me get out of that impasse where I didn't know, trying to repeat that plate. And so that's what I do all the time. And actually, it's quite remarkable because I know how to get myself into that state, which is basically being empty. It's almost like, I don't have any responsibilities. It's not my fault if it doesn't work. Even when I demonstrate. In fact, this is what I demonstrate. So when I went to NCECA, I said, I haven't planned anything. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to do what I call my spontaneity performance, which is I don't know what I'm going to do. So I just asked for a whole pile of clay. And I had picked up some cardboard, something or other from downstairs, and I remember doing something with that. I sort of built some clay stuff around that and made a sort of thing. But yes, it's a good place to be, and I do know how to get there.
Oh, I've got so many questions about that. So, okay, first one is, how do you get yourself there? What do you need to do to make sure that you
need to come out of your head, stop thinking.
Yeah.
Resist the temptation. The most important thing is to resist the temptation to second guess what might happen. So if any thought comes in of what I think might happen, it just goes. It goes out of my head. So I actively resist the temptation to try to anticipate what might happen, and go into my body, let the hands lead. So it's coming out of my head and letting the hands lead.
So how do you know when to stop?
The same way I know to pick up this brush and make a green arc. It's the same thing. There'll be a sense of, okay, that's enough.
And when you're doing this, because as you say, you don't know what's going to happen next, do you like everything that you make? Well,
the funny thing is that nearly always I do when it comes from that place, yes. I mean, I give myself permission that it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. You know, that's another thing that helps. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. I can easily make some more. No big deal, you know. It doesn't have to work. If it has to work, then I've got pressure on. And but actually, I know how to take the pressure off even when it actually does have to work. Because one commission that I had, it's for the same people who want these large clay paintings now. They commissioned a clay painting to go outside, and this was composed of a lot of smaller tiles, but they were treated as one big painting. And so, and the tiles were, I mean, although they're smaller, they're still very big by any standard. You know, they're, I think, 16 inches square and quite thick. And because the clients wanted them thick, they wanted them to be substantial and to have a sculptural, you know, three-dimensional quality. So, you know, it was a long space, quite a big space they wanted this painting to fill. And so they were technically, I hadn't worked out, I didn't know as much then as I know now about how to make and fire tiles without them cracking. We lost a lot of them cracked. So it took about 6 months to make enough tiles for this one painting. And then I had to paint them. So, okay, so we biscuit fired them, got enough tiles. How do I go about painting them then? And so I did this, so I laid them all out on a big trestle tables, big tables, so I could lay it all out in one piece. And then what I did was, okay, so today is Wednesday, I'm going to go in next Wednesday and paint them. Make sure that I got all the glazes ready, all the materials ready. And I sort of withdrew from society. I didn't want to go out. During that week in the run-up, I didn't want to go and socialise with anybody much. I just sort of became, it's like, almost like I was sort of gathering, accumulating sort of psychic and creative energy. And I still had to say to myself, if it doesn't work, it's okay, we can make some more. As I didn't know what was going to happen, I resisted the temptation to plan it or design it or sketch it or draw it. I didn't want to do any of that. Thing is, if I had sketched it or drawn it, I would have that sketch in my mind. I wouldn't be focusing what's happening right in front of my eyes. It's a distraction. And so I didn't want to have any distractions. So I didn't, you know, I resisted any temptation to anticipate what might happen. So I went in, I remember going in on the Wednesday about sort of lunchtime, and it's got a lot of blue at one end, big circle, quite a lot of circles, and it's sort of green, you know, blue one, and then it went to, and I just sort of let it happen. I let it happen. I didn't plan it. I let it happen. You know, trusting. It's just basically trusting that it will work, trusting that whatever happens is okay. Something interesting will happen. And it did. Something interesting did happen. It worked really, really well. I think by about 6 o'clock I'd finished. It only took about 5 hours. Well, not even that, I don't think. And that's the one they've got.
And how did you feel afterwards?
A bit tired, yeah, but I felt fine. Good. I knew it had gone well. I knew it had gone well. And yeah, very tired.
And when you're in that state for a sustained period of time, do you find yourself being pulled out? Moments where you're starting to go to judge what you're doing, or try to get ahead of yourself and go, oh, it could be nice to do this, or it needs something here.
I have noticed that in the past, if I do what often painters do, is if I pull back and start looking, that gets in the way. That doesn't help, because then I'm sort of go into evaluating mode. And actually, I don't need to. It's like the intuitive part of me knows what it looks like. It knows what's happening, and just trust it and let it. So I have learned to resist the temptation to pull back and take a good look at the overall structure, because that doesn't help. It doesn't help. It brings me up into my head. Exactly. And so I don't do that. And so what was it? I can't remember what else you asked me about.
Well, if you ever find yourself starting to feel like you are moving out of the moment and you're starting to get there's some pressure or inkling that you might want to step back and think about what you're doing, to keep yourself in the moment and continue to work intuitively, particularly when you do it over a long period of time.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I just know that it works best if I just watch what my hands are doing.
It seems incredibly brave.
Does it?
To me, to do that. Well, because you're relinquishing control to something that you consciously aren't controlling.
But also, I relinquish responsibility. So if it doesn't work, it's not my fault.
Does it ever not work? Can you then justify everything you're doing because that's what happened in the moment, and therefore you're almost no longer responsible for the quality of the work?
I mean, that is a tricky one, actually, because years ago, I did used to sort of evaluate things that come out of the kiln. I think, oh, I don't like that. I'm not sure about that one. And then, and I would have this pile of rejects, and you know what's in my mind at the moment is, as I'm saying this, there was a particular pair of sculptures, actually tall coil, two coil pots that were quite tall, and they looked like they were a pair sort of dancing. Very, very bold. There were some thumb marks all over, colours all over the place. And anyway, one day I wasn't sure, and I took the hammer to them. And but I had them professionally photographed before that, so I've got a record of it. And I was looking at several times. I've looked at that photograph, and I thought, what was my problem with that, really? Why? What happened? And I think it was actually I'd made a sudden sort of, they were much bolder and stronger, certainly in the use of the clay handling, actually, than I'd done before. And I think I wasn't ready. I hadn't caught up with myself. And, you know, I think I was quite wrong to have broken it up. And I think I've done that, you know, probably a few times. And so I don't trust my responses to reject things. In fact, I very rarely reject things if I'm not sure. Doesn't mean to say I sell everything or exhibit everything, but I've got a room that I put stuff in which I'm not sure about, and I now go in there over time, and I go in there and I think, what's my problem with these? There's nothing wrong with them. So
how long does it take to get to that point where maybe you are catching up with yourself and you can look at that and go, actually, yes, I do see the merit or value or what I was trying to communicate perhaps with that work?
I mean, it depends. It depends really on some of the pieces. I mean, I think there was a stage when I was sort of being much more expressionistic with the clay, and I wasn't sure about that. And those pieces ended up in the room. I mean, they've all sold. I've all exhibited, because what's interesting is that other people can see it, and it took me. I mean, it hasn't happened for ages, actually, because I don't know. It seems like most of what I've been working on the last few years is all. I haven't had any of those issues at all, really. But when I did, that's what I stopped breaking stuff up.
Do you think that indicates catching up with yourself? That the distance between your intuitive self and the part of yourself that wants to judge work by whatever metric, or the gap has narrowed over time?
Yes, I think so. I think I'm much more integrated, really. Yeah.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to get closer to being more intuitive and expressive in their own practice, what would you suggest? Where would you suggest they start?
I would suggest they got some materials that they like and some time, and just sort of did something with an empty mind. I mean, often the most difficult, because I mean, this is how I teach as well, because, I mean, and you know that because, you know, you've done it too. I mean, the way, what can sometimes take the time for people who are new to this is to accept what they've done as being valid. And, you know, and my assessment criteria are, if you're in that empty place, if you genuinely don't know what you're doing and you haven't planned it, then it's valid. It's valid, whatever it is, it's valid. It's not only valid, it's actually sacred, I think. So I keep, you know, if I'm doing sort of bits and pieces in clay, I've got loads of doodles in clay in the studio that, you know, that things that I might sort of play with at some point. Because sometimes some of the large sculptures do come out of doodles and things. But I keep them all. I keep them all. I would never ever, and I never have done, broken or thrown away anything that comes from that place, because it's like I want to make sure that my unconscious knows that all these gifts that it gives me from the unconscious, I can receive them. I can say thank you. I'm not going to chuck them in the bin and say, oh well, that's no good, because it, you know, I'm going to, and so that keeps the flow flowing. So it's important to accept what comes. Really important to accept what comes. And that's often the bit that can cause some people difficulty. If they've got a strong inner critic, or if they've been shamed in some way earlier in life. I mean, a lot of people have. If they're trying to be technically a show-off or something, or a perfectionist, all of those things are just sort of stuff you need to leave outside the studio. But the most important thing is to accept what comes from that space of not knowing what's going to happen as being really, really valid. And with curiosity, actually, it's not only accepting, it's being curious. Oh wow, is that what I did? Is that because you sort of come out of this sort of intuitive conscious state, and you can come into a sort of out of the intuitive unconscious state, and you can come into a sort of conscious awareness. Oh, is that what I did? Wow, isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? I made this form and it was like this, and wow, and I used a lot of colour over here and less over there. Wow, is that what I did? You know, to have that curiosity.
That's lovely, because it's when we're in that conscious place, I think often it's easy to fall into judgment.
Yes.
Whereas you're choosing to look at it with wonder and curiosity.
That's right.
And that there is something to discover here, as opposed to something to judge. Yeah. There's something delightful, absolutely delightful about that. I'm finding it fascinating, the overlap between you're using the term that you're not responsible for the outcome. When I do improv work, if I'm improvising in front of an audience, that's one of the things that really helps me. Is telling myself whatever happens, it's not that it's not my responsibility or my fault, but I can't judge myself or be judged upon it, because it is a momentary response to what's happening, and it's live. And yes, it's uncertain, and it may not be perfect if it wouldn't be perfect as a script in a film, but that's also the form that I'm in, that there is space for the imperfection, and sometimes that imperfection is actually the perfection of it. Yes. But giving myself that mental almost excuse to not filter, not judge what's happening, gives me, it gets myself out of the way, and that's when the best performance happens.
Absolutely,
and I think
exactly.
So I think there's a wonderful overlap there, and it's a wonderful space to be in, because you are surprising yourself. Like, oh, that was interesting. What do we go from here? And how delightful. That's right. I think there's something lovely about being able to surprise yourself.
Yes.
On a regular basis.
Yes, exactly. It is exactly. I mean, improvisation that you're talking about is exactly the same. It's the same state. It's just a different medium. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you feel that it takes strength or energy to, or even confidence to access that?
I think it probably takes all of those. I do think it takes energy. I mean, I have noticed that the days when I'm in the studio, for example, preparing clay or maybe even or building a form that might be, because it is true that when I'm making some of the larger sculpture forms, I'm often guided by a maquette that I will have made, and so I'm aware of sort of allowing the larger form to evolve if it needs to evolve, but also I am keeping an eye on the small maquette, so it's not a totally free process like I've been talking about the painting. Now, why did I say that? I can't remember what you asked me now.
Oh, asking about energy and
confidence.
Energy.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, yes. So what I have noticed is that if I'm doing something like, for example, because I've made several big circular forms and they've a bit sort of donutty like, they're about sort of 4 or 5 feet tall. Some of them have sort of central sections, some of them don't, but the basic donutty form is similar. The first time I made one was the first time I'd made one, and I was exhausted, absolutely exhausted at the end of the day, or 2 or 3 days. The second time I wasn't, and the third time I wasn't as tired, because in a way I sort of knew how to do it. And what I have found is, and when I'm painting on the ceramics or on the sculptures or on the paintings, because I haven't done it before, I am exhausted at the end of that. Really, it takes all my focus, all my concentration, because I'm doing something that I've never done before. And so I've noticed that the energy required to do that is probably 10 times as much as doing something that I do know what I'm doing and have done before. Like, for example, with the large tiles that I'm making now, it's taken a while, but I do know technically now how to prepare the clay and how to fire them, and so we can make more. I have my assistant Sue helping me when I'm doing that, and we can make more in a day than we used to when we were working out how to do it. But still, that is far less energy than it takes when I'm painting, because I need to concentrate in a different kind of way, because I'm doing something I've never done before. And so that I am aware that takes the most intense focus. And I've noticed that actually when I'm running creativity courses as well, that effect is the same on the participants, that they're much more exhausted when they're doing stuff that they haven't done before in that, coming from that place. So it is important. So that's why when I did that big painting and I mentioned that I would need a week to sort of psych myself up for it, it was really a week to prepare my energy and almost purify my energy. I wasn't distracted by anything else at all. And that I would be alert, I would be well rested. That's the other important thing. It doesn't work if I'm tired. It doesn't work if I'm disorientated or anxious or anything, which I'm not often anxious, but I obviously I get tired sometimes, and so I need to be well rested. I need to have slept well, and that's important.
And is the energy different working physically, making a shape out of clay versus painting the surface? Either of a canvas or of the clay itself? I think it is. I think it is much more intense, much more intense to do the painting. I mean, the only time the making is as intense is, like, for example, once or twice, I remember, because I wanted to find a way of, could I make large forms spontaneously? Because obviously working with the clay when it's soft, you're subject to the limitations of what clay will do, and it won't stand up, it'll fall over while it's soft. And if you want to work on a large piece, or that's all one piece, then, so what I did was I got hold of a carpet tube, which is a very strong cardboard, and which was about 10 feet long, nailed the top of it to a beam in the studio, and then put clay all around it so that I could manipulate the clay and the carpet tube would support it, because I wanted to do a spontaneous large piece.
And so that, that took that kind of, sort of intense energy, because I hadn't done that before, and so I was sort of focusing on every little tiny aspect of it, because I was connecting with how it was going to be. I wasn't, but the sort of energy required to make one of those donut forms is much easier, because it's simply a much more sort of technical energy. I know how, I just need to smooth the clay, make sure it's joined properly, but I don't have to intensely connect with the quality of the surface, or the mark, or the form itself. So it's not as tiring at all. Nowhere near.
And what's the difference between, earlier you said if you're going to decorate a large piece and you had a sketch, the sketch would get in the way of you actually decorating it in an intuitive way. But you use maquettes for larger forms. What's the difference? Why not make the large form in a completely open way, spontaneous way?
Because you've got the sort of technical restraints of actually, this is what I was talking about just now.
Yeah.
The clay will only support itself when it's dry, and you can't manipulate it when it's dry. So you've got it's the limitations of the material make it quite difficult to work out how you could make a large piece. And you'd have to have some sort of inner former to support the clay, which means you'd have to anticipate the shape of the former.
So you use the maquette
So the maquette, so with the temple, for example, I did make a small maquette. In fact, I did a doodle. Okay, this is how do I, to answer the question that I asked myself earlier, oh crikey, how do you build a kiln, build a temple? What I did was I came back and I got some clay, and I said, okay, I set the timer for an hour. I gave myself an hour, okay, make a temple. So I made a small temple, about, 10 inches tall or so. And I'd never made a temple before. I didn't even know what a temple was like. I have no idea what I thought I was doing, but I just thought, I'll doodle a temple. And so that, that's at that scale, you can sort of, things can just happen quite easily, because the clay will, if I make a tall column, it'll stand up. And so, and in fact, actually, when I'd made that first doodle of a temple, that is actually what the temple became. Because I had to then work out, okay, looking at the maquette, how would I then make a full-size temple from that? I had to work out the technology of, I had to get into architecture then, and how to do it. And I did that with the help of an architect friend of mine, and with the help of a builder.
So we haven't used the word play in this conversation.
Okay.
It's not a criticism. I'm asking. So the question is, what is your relationship to the word play as it applies to your practice?
Well, I am essentially playing.
Okay.
I am playing. I mean, I felt that really, and one of the sort of projects that I've done recently was I've been helping out the Appledore Social Club, which was the British Legion, which is just 2 doors down from the studio, and they're trying to modernise it and trying to attract a new, younger audience. And they asked me if I would help them, and they asked me if I would paint their skittle alley for them, which is, it's a big long, three-dimensional inner space. And so I thought, well, that'll be fun, So I took a whole load of paints, and I was playing. I was just as free as a child playing. I thought I could do whatever I like. Oh, fab, yeah. So, yeah, I had a fabulous time. I had a wonderful time just messing about. Yeah, and it's playing. It's playing.
And on the, I know I keep coming back to this, but in terms of judgment, that was again a very public space,
yes,
but also one where you wouldn't be able to put it away and come back to 6 months later and go, oh, actually I do like this now. People were going to see it, and people who live around you are going to see it. They're going to be using it every day.
Yeah.
There was the potential for really being aware of how are other people going to look at this.
And I had to do quite a lot of work actually to resist all of that. In many ways, it was the most challenging thing I've done, because they weren't people who were, I would have thought, were my natural audience. And the reason I was asked to do it is because the guy who was repairing the roof of the skittle alley was also doing some repair work on the studio building at the same time. And so he suggested to the committee that I should come in, and none of them really knew. They don't really, I don't think they'd ever been in the studio. They didn't really know what I was up to. And so I was, and what are the skittlers going to, the guys who come in and play skittles, how's it going to affect their game, and what are they going to think of it, and all of that. And I had to forget all of that. And so it was actually in many ways the most challenging, because if I'm doing a commission, like for example the clients who commissioned that big painting, I knew all the time they know my work and they like my work, and that's why they've come to me and not to somebody else. So therefore I'm fine. I can do whatever I like, because they like my work. That's why they've come to me. But I didn't have that same sense, because so it was one of the most heartwarming things was that they would come in and they absolutely loved it. And not only from the young guys who play skittles, but some of the older guys, who mostly men actually, who'd lived in Appledore all their life, who've got these strong Appledore voices, and they've been out at sea all their lives, and they come in and they haven't had much engagement with art or anything like that. And they come in and they go, "Oh, this is lovely."
That's got to be so gratifying.
Yeah, absolutely lovely. Really gratifying. Really gratifying. Very heartwarming and touching. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you feel that the more you create work and the more people respond to it, the easier the process becomes? Or is it always a challenge to keep that voice of judgment or fear of failure or whatever it is that might get in your way, keeping that at
actually
bay?
Don't have that judgment anymore. I don't have that fear of failure. I haven't had that for years.
But even the Skittle Alley, and
I didn't have a fear of failure. No, I didn't.
Okay.
I had a fear that they might not like it, but I didn't have a fear of failure. No, because I liked it, so therefore I hadn't failed.
Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. So I have some quick-fire questions for you. Your answers can take as long as you like. But
okay.
You're very good, I've noticed, at taking compliments.
Am I? Oh, that's nice.
There you go. How does that work? Why do you think that is?
Oh, I had to be told. I had to be told. I remember. Now, I've got a very good friend, actually. I have to thank her for this. A psychotherapist. And, oh dear, it's quite embarrassing to admit this, actually. But years and years ago, when I was starting out, and I had a visit from a woman who had a gallery in the US, central US. I can't remember where it was. Maybe Boston, somewhere around there. And she'd bought some work, and then she came back for some more. And she rang up. I mean, I'm really embarrassed about this. She rang up while my friend, who is, she's a friend who happens to be a psychotherapist, was in the room. And I took the phone call from this lady from Canada, from Boston, who had the gallery. And I put the phone down and I said to my friend in a really puzzled voice, "She wants to come and buy some more work." I thought, oh, what, And I'd sort of put her off. I'd sort of said that, well, I'm not sure if I've got any, And my friend said, "What's your problem? What's your problem? The trouble is with people like you who are control freaks, they are often the only way you can stay in control is by saying no." And that was one of the best bits of advice I've had, actually. Because yes, it feels very different to say yes, actually. To say yes is open. I'm open. I'm open to something that might transpire. If I say no, I'm in control and I'm closed and actually you can't get to me. I'm in charge. Feels very different. And she was absolutely right. I had got into a bit of a habit of saying no simply because it was the only And I didn't even know I was doing it. I was completely unaware of it. But it was actually a really useful thing. So I can't remember what you asked me to get me on.
Well, I just noticed I was commenting on your ability to take compliments.
Oh, thank you. That's right. Yeah. So that was when, and the other thing that she said was, if I wasn't actually taking a compliment, then the person, it was like I was throwing away a gift. Somebody was giving me a gift, and if I was not receiving it, not only would I lose out on the gift, but they would feel hurt that their gift hadn't been received. And so I had to be told that. I had to be taught that. And, it was a very, very good lesson that I'm very grateful for. Yeah, so...
So is it easier now?
Oh, yeah. Very easy. No, it's lovely. It's lovely. I love compliments. Yes, bring them on.
What do you know now that you wish you had known earlier?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, I had a steep learning curve in the beginning when I had to learn how to, I mean, one of the best things I did, this is very, around the same time I had the friend who was a psychotherapist, but I was, very good at putting people off. Because one of the things I'm doing is I'm writing an autobiography, and I've written about this in there when somebody called Mike Robinson, who was a curator of the university collection at the Museum of Belfast, the Museum of Ulster in Belfast. He came to the studio and wanted to buy a piece for the museum collection, and it would have been the first museum collection that I would have been in. And he came along and he said, "Oh, well, I'd just like to see what you've got." And I was saying, he'd go towards a piece, and I'd say, "Oh no, that's not quite right. I'm not sure about that one." And anyway, I eventually succeeded totally in putting him off, and he left without a piece. And after he'd gone, I thought I completely betrayed myself. I have shot myself in the effing foot. And I lived in South Molton at the time, and the next week, in the local newspaper, there was a thing advertised by Dartington saying 1-day sales training for self-employed people. And I thought, well, it's Dartington, so, but then they probably haven't got anything to teach me because they probably don't know anything about art. But I might as well go along and see, And I was so supercilious and thinking they wouldn't know anything. Even though that was Dartington, and Dartington does know about. In fact, I wouldn't have gone if it hadn't been for Dartington. But actually, one of the things they said was that, do you actually believe? Well, the first question they asked was, do you actually believe in what you're selling? And in the sort of, silence of that room, and I wasn't in the studio at the time, and I thought, if you scratch me deep enough, actually, yes, I do. So, okay. He said, because we can't get any further. If the answer's no, then you better go home and come back another day. But actually, the answer was yes. And so then the next question this guy said was, if the answer's yes, then identify the 10 qualities that make you believe in what you're selling. And so we each had to sit down and find 10 qualities, and then in the afternoon we had to stand up and tell them to each other. And I would have rather had all my teeth out without anaesthetic to do that at the time, But the surprising thing is, and I thought this is, I'm totally acting, I'm making this up, this is absolute, as I was saying it to the others, my confidence sort of deserted me. But I said it anyway. I said, oh yes, I like my work because it's, it's quite lively and it's colourful and it's, I was in this flat voice, And they said, oh wow, that sounds great. That's really good. Yeah, of course it is. And I thought, crikey, what? And so, that was the beginning of a learning process to, to believe, to be open about believing in my work and to being able to share that belief with others. And so, in fact, the guy, Mike Robinson, he did come back about 6 months later, and he did buy a piece, which is still in the Ulster Museum collection. So it came right in the end. But that was another important thing. So I think, but I think, basically since then, I got all my sort of big issues out of the way quite early on about, how to present my work and how to, and, I think, and then since then I've just been able to, roll along, do whatever I want, really.
And I'm glad you do.
Thank you.
Who inspires you?
Inspires me now? Who inspires me now? I mean, the thing is that, I'm not, two people whose work I admire. I wouldn't say that, I don't know if I could say they inspire me, but I admire. One is an American ceramic artist called Jun Kaneko, who makes large-scale work, and he's very painterly, and has a big foundation too. I mean, he's hugely successful, and he does all sorts of interesting things in his foundation, involving sort of playwrights and contemporary music, and as well as ceramics and painting. He works in all sorts of media. He promotes, but he himself, his own medium is ceramics and painting, large scale, painterly, and I really like his work. And the other one who's just come into my mind, popped into my head, is Nikki de Saint-Phy, who did do you know her work? She's an amazing artist who worked, she didn't work in clay, but she worked in sculpture and mosaic and concrete, and she did a massive great park, which I have to admit, to my embarrassment, I've never been to yet, in Italy, where she made massive, great, large figures inspired by tarot cards, and they're all colourful and large and wacky and totally bonkers. So those are the two. I mean, apart from, and I went to see, apart from Miro, and whose work I've always liked as well.
Wonderful. And I ask guests if they'd be happy to offer a creative challenge to anyone listening, something that they could do in their own practice.
Right.
Do you have a creative challenge that you could share with us?
All right, I'll come up with one. Okay, I'll come up with one. Okay, I would like.
We can take a minute if you want.
No, it's all right. So I could ask. We could give them a creative challenge that they have to have a clay and a timer. They have to have a timer. They have to set the timer for 30 minutes, and in 30 minutes they have to make 30. What should I say? 30. Let's say, actually, I think I'm going to say 30 figures. That's the first thing that came to mind. They have to make 30 figures in 30 minutes, and they have to then photograph each one individually and look at each one individually. They have to accept them. So they not only have to make these 30 figures in 30 minutes without planning, and they must not. And the trouble is, you see, that normally when I set these projects in the studio, I don't say until the absolute moment that I push the timer, I don't say what people are going to do, because I don't want people to start planning.
Yeah.
So that's the danger, having, said in words, that people start thinking, oh, what figures? Oh, I could make this figure and that figure. And you've got to resist. You don't know. Empty your mind. If any figure comes into your mind, empty it out, because that's your head. And just let your hands make these 30 figures, and then keep them.
Brilliant. Okay, I've got two more questions. Okay. I don't know where they're going to go. First one is, you seem to have an incredible, a powerful, almost ferocious expectation. You can be very passionate about the right way of doing something.
Yes, I've often wondered. I have wondered about that, actually.
I'm worried about using the word ferocious, because that sounds vicious, which it isn't.
Yes.
But there's a real strength. But I think passion might be the better word.
Right.
That there are things that are acceptable and there are things that are not, as a creative person. And I'm just curious to know where that comes from, that conviction.
Well, that's because I suppose where does it come from? I mean, if I look at, so say, people's work and I'm not going to say any names now, but if I look at people's work who I think are, where I think the work is largely dominated coming from the head, I always ask myself, now what would they actually make if they actually let go? I bet there would be more to come. And so I suppose I do feel that the way of working that I do and that I advocate doing comes from the deepest part of us. And so therefore it's going to be the most powerful, we're going to be the most connected to it, and it's going to have the most validity. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm aware that I might come across as sounding that this is the right way, or that, you know, and I'm, well, you know, I don't quite know what to do about that, really.
Be unapologetic about it. Accept it.
Yes, okay. Yeah. Because actually what I've noticed is that people who, because I'm now, actually, this is something that's happened since we last met, actually, is that, you know, because some people who come on courses here in this area, you know, left to their own devices afterwards, I've started up a couple of tutor groups, and so we meet once a month, and there's 4 in each group. So I get to see how they develop. And I think, I don't think that if you saw their work, you would say, oh, they've been influenced by Sandy Brown, or they've been on one of Sandy Brown's courses. But the common denominator is they are working intuitively. And their work is about themselves, and it's strong, but it's strong in all sorts of different ways.
Wonderful. Well, Sandy, this has been fantastic. It's been great fun.
That's good.
If people wanted to see more of your work or find out more about what you do, where would be the best place online for them to find you?
Well, I mean, I have a website. Which is sandybrownarts.com. Also, I have you know, my studio is open now to the public, which it wasn't last time we met, but it's now, I've started opening it to the public every Friday, because I'm enjoying, you know, a lot of people haven't been able to, you know, been a bit shy about coming in, or didn't realise that it was open, and so, and then you don't have to book, you can just sort of turn up on Fridays and have a look. There's a continuing evolving permanent exhibition of work, quite a lot of which is for sale at any time, so anybody can come in and see what's happening. Brilliant. And other times by appointment, and people, if they can't come on Fridays, they can email me, and it's usually a way to, but I welcome visitors, so either to the website or better still, in person to the studio. Very welcome. Love meeting people.
Wonderful. Well, Sandy, thank you so much for making the time to speak with me. This has been a real joy, and I always enjoy chatting with you and learning about your work, but also just the way that you see things and the way that you do what you do, which is, I find, a constant source of inspiration. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. It's been great. Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
There. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode of The Practical Creative. If you'd like to learn more about my guests, you can visit the Practical Creative website at thepracticalcreative.life, where you'll find links to all of their work and the previous episodes. And if you're looking for something to stimulate your own creative practice, check out the Creative Challenges page. You can also sign up to receive my challenge packs, where I put all the challenges from my guests in seasons 1 and 2 of the podcast into downloadable PDFs. Just head over to the website and check it out. And while you're there, be sure to have a look at the resources page, where I've compiled links to all the materials and services referenced by my guests, including books they've written on creativity and business, online courses, Facebook groups, and much, much more. And if you've enjoyed this episode of the Practical Creative Podcast, it would be fantastic if you would subscribe to the show, or share it with a friend, or even leave a review on iTunes. And I'd also genuinely love to hear what you found to be exciting, or inspiring, or even challenging about these conversations. You can find me on Instagram at Practical Creative. Until next time.